Hi Year 8 and welcome to Lesson 1 of your remote learning. We will, over the next week, be exploring non-fiction texts, and we're going to be looking at 4 texts in total which focus on the topic of dogs. Let's make sure we've got everything we need though, please, before we continue. You can see here that this is our schedule for remote learning lessons in English. We'll be starting out today on Wednesday the 8th of September with lesson 1, and over the coming days we'll be completing 6 lessons in total, reading and writing non-fiction texts. So all of your lessons you'll be able to access through Show My Homework. You'll need to make sure you've got everything you need ready before we start. So you're definitely going to need a pen or a pencil, something to write with, and something to write on, whether that's in a notebook or on a piece of paper. If you don't have access to that, it is okay if you wish to type your answers. But do make sure you have evidence of the lesson, because your teachers will be asking you to share what you have done that day. You also want to allow yourself some time to complete this. 45 minutes is how long it should take. And finally, make sure you're all distraction-free before we begin. So our reading today is a 21st century non-fiction text. And remember the difference between fiction and non-fiction. If something is fiction, then it's imagined, okay? But if it's non-fiction, we're dealing with something that happens in real life. So in this case, it is an article from a newspaper. It's called Forget 101 Dalmatians, 16 are driving me dotty. And the whole article is attached to your homework, on Show My Homework, and it's as a PDF, so you'll be able to open that on any device that you might be accessing this on, whether it's on a laptop, for example, or an iPad or a phone. You may wish to pause the video here and read that article in full if you want to, but we will be working through it bit by bit throughout the lesson too. So the first thing we want to note down before we continue is the difference in the types of information that we're going to be looking for in our text today. Hopefully you've come across these terms already, but they are really useful to recap. So we're going to be looking for explicit information, and that is things we learn in the text that are really clear and directly stated by the writer. And we can find explicit information when we're looking perhaps for when something happened. It might be a date or a place that is named. It can be other details that describe maybe a character. For example, we might be told the colour of their eyes or their clothes. It might also refer to feelings. A writer might tell us very directly and explicitly how a character feels. Okay, the girl was feeling happy and excited to return to school. Implicit information, on the other hand, is not directly stated in the text. There's often evidence for it there, but it requires the reader to make inferences. Sometimes we call this reading between the lines. So we use the evidence and clues in the text to piece together exactly what is going on. We might see this in a text, for example, where we don't want to directly say how a character is feeling, but we want to imply it instead. So if we had a character who perhaps was feeling nervous, we might say that they were pacing up and the boy was pacing up and down and looking at the floor, desperate not to make eye contact with anyone. We can see here that there is an implication that perhaps this person is a bit anxious or even uncomfortable, but we're not directly told. So we're going to do these 2 things today. We're going to be looking at things that we are clearly told in the text and things that are suggested. Okay, let's start with the opening of this article. I'm going to read out to you the first 3 paragraphs on the left-hand side. When I've completed it, I will then place a task for you to do on the right. And at that point, once you've heard what the task is, you'll need to pause the video to complete it. Let's read first. As the July sun sets over a Shropshire farm, sheep graze quietly in the fields. Horses doze contentedly in their stables, and hawks circle majestically in the skies above. This rural scene is like something out of a painting. But suddenly it erupts into chaos. Around the corner of a barn appear 16 frisky Dalmatian puppies, tumbling and scampering in every direction as they are pursued by their owner, 21-year-old Becky Elvins. As quickly as she can scoop them up and place them in their large wicker basket, they spill out again, darting between her legs, nipping at her Wellingtons, and endlessly disappearing and reappearing in a polka dot whirl. I feel exhausted just watching the bedtime bedlam, which has been part of Becky's routine for the past 7 weeks. As a trainee teacher, she spends her day handling classes of primary school children, but that's nothing compared to looking after this brood, born to her much-loved Dalmatian Millie at the end of May. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is find some explicit information in this text. You'll need to read through the statements here, A through to H, and select 4 statements that are true. You should be able to work this out through a process of elimination, reading each statement and checking across to the paragraphs on the left to see whether this can be proven. When you're done, you should have written down 4 letters that you think represent the statements that are true. Pause the video and complete the task now. Okay, so now that you have completed that task, make sure you are ready to mark your answers, and let's go through how we might have identified which of these were true. So the first one then is A. The countryside where Becky lives is normally quiet. Okay, well, how can I prove that that's true? So I'm going to need to look at how she describes the farm and the countryside, and then why this might have changed. So I can see here, look, the Shropshire farm that they're on, the sheep are grazing quietly. There's fields and horses are dozing. Hawks are circling above. So it seems like something really quiet and really calm here until the arrival of those many Dalmatian puppies. So I'm going to say that that one is definitely true. B, the puppies are 16 weeks old. Well, I'm going to look for if that can be disproven. 16 actually is the number of puppies there are. And if I keep reading down to paragraph 2, it says actually that these puppies running around have been part of the routine for the 7 weeks. So I would suggest here then that the puppies are 7 weeks old and not 16. That one is false. C, the puppies run between Becky's legs and bite her Wellingtons. I've said this is true. I wonder if that matches up to your response. How did you know, if you picked it out, that it was true? Where's the evidence? Okay, so we should be able to see here in paragraph 2, we're told they were darting between her legs, nipping at her Wellingtons. So if we know the word nipping, that it means to bite. Okay, so Becky is a trainee teacher in a secondary school. Now we're looking for this explicitly, so we need to find the part where it talks about her as a trainee teacher. You can see that actually right here at the end on the last paragraph. And we can see it says that she handles classes in primary school. So we know that this one here, D, is false. E, the puppies live on a farm in Hampshire. Again, we want to find the word farm in order to start to identify this. And in fact, we're told Shropshire farm. So we know that that is incorrect too. F, Millie is the much-loved mother of her puppies. Also true. Well done if you got that one right. We should have been looking down. Again, right to the bottom for this one, we're told that she was born to her much-loved Dalmatian Millie. Okay, and we could look for that phrase, much loved, scanning through the text till we can see that it's true. G, the puppies were born in July. Do I know this? Okay, well, it's July when the writer is writing it. And we're told that they were born 7 weeks ago, so it can't be July. That cannot be right. It can be disproven by the text. So finally then, the puppies cause chaos on the farm. Well, yes, that's also true. We know it disrupts the rather usually normal countryside at the beginning. And in fact, the writer uses the word chaos. Suddenly it erupts into chaos. So that's a good one to prove our theory. And we can tell by their movements as well. And also this word here, I feel exhausted, says the writer, by watching the bedtime bedlam. And if we know the word bedlam, that also tells us that there is some confusion and rather chaos going on. Okay, give yourself a mark out of 4. And let's have a look at this word bedlam a little bit further before we move on. So it's really interesting to me when we read different texts where words come from and how their meanings might change perhaps over time. So when we use the word bedlam today, we mean that it has a scene of chaos and confusion, perhaps something that is chaotic, noisy, and maybe associated with ideas of madness. What people often might not know is where that word originates from. So bedlam actually has a really bleak and very negative history in English. And but it is interesting to see how that word has evolved. So in fact, it links back to a hospital in London, originally called the Hospital of St Mary of Bethlehem, which later became the Bethlehem Royal Hospital. Now, this is a well-known hospital, or was, because it was the first hospital for mentally ill patients, that was known as an asylum. A few years after it opened, the hospital again was rebuilt, and it looked like this. We can see this very grand, very impressive looking institution. However, it is really infamous and well-known, famous for its brutal and very cruel treatment of the patients that lived there. And in fact, rather shockingly, tourists would actually go to look at the patients that were in the hospital, and they would pay to go in to see these really unwell patients. And again, that's really part of that very cruel and awful way that they were treated. So there's a strong history here of the word bedlam originating from this very noisy, very chaotic place, and where people were not treated very well. And this is when there was very little understanding of people's mental health and how to treat them effectively. And so this is where the word actually originates. I would like us to make a note of that, because that can be a really useful word to pick up on actually in other texts, to understand a bit of that history. So can you make a note, please, of the word and its definition? What we take it to mean today, something that is chaotic, confused, noisy, to look more closely at the language. So there are 3 questions to answer here, and this is don't worry if there's ones you think, I found that one a bit tough. We're going to be going through them all together afterwards. But I want you to think closely about the types of words and language the writer has used. So 1, can you tell me, if you know the word, what technique is used to show the difference between the farm and the life on the farm, between before and after the puppy's arrival? Number 2, can you look in here and make a list for me of any verbs that are used to describe the movements and the actions of the puppies? You might want to look for those ing words. And 3, okay, this time I want you to make some inference. Why might the writer have linked the puppies to Becky's job as a primary school teacher? What are they suggesting here when it says she spends all her day handling classes of primary school children, but that's nothing compared to looking after this brood? Pause the video and jot down your answers to questions 1, 2 and 3.